2 minutes, Mr. Chair. And why did I make my a Civic Plus? Okay, Mr. Chair, you're good to go.
Okay. Everybody ready? Is Angela ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, great. Okay, I now call the April 15th, 2020 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Item 3, public comment. Citizens who desire to address the board with regard to matters on the agenda will be read at this time. Members of the public desiring to make comments during this portion of the meeting will be allowed to submit their written comments to the office of the city secretary. Written and or emailed comments must be received by 3 p.m. Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. The City of Sugar Land reserves the right to remove any written, emailed comments deemed inappropriate and or not related to matters posted on the agenda. Comments or discussion by the board will only be made at the time the subject is scheduled for consideration. I'll open for public comment and ask Ms. Rankin, was there any public comments submitted?
No items, Mr. Chair.
There were no. If no public comments were submitted, then I'll close this public comment session and we'll move forward to item 4, the minutes. Consideration of an action on the minutes of the January 15th, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any corrections?
No.
No.
Okay, no, not hearing any corrections. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Schwab. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second. I think that was Mr. Brown. I have a motion and a second. We're going to vote, and I'm actually going to call roll. So when you hear a name, if you can give a yay or nay, that will be perfect. Mr. Schwab.
Yay.
Mr. Puveda.
Yay.
Miss Lindsay. Miss Lindsay on mute, maybe?
I just unmuted. I should be okay.
Okay, I hear you now.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Can we get a yay or a nay from you?
Yay.
Okay,
Yay.
perfect. And Mr. Brown.
Yay.
And Mr. LaRocca, I will yay. With a unanimous vote, the minutes are approved. Thank you. We'll move forward to item 5, public hearing. To receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed special exception to the side and rear yard setback for 2402 Lively Lane, Lot 4, Block 3, Chimney Stone, Section 1, in the standard single family. All right, got cut off. There it is, standard single-family R1 district. Ms. Waller? And Laura, I think you are maybe on mute.
Yes. Okay. We're working now. Okay. So a little bit of technical difficulties with this different situation, but we're going to start with a special exception. This will be for side and rear lots. We've seen some other special exceptions in this area. It is Chimney Stone Section 1 again, and it is currently R1 zoning, but we'll need to come forward for a rezoning to R1Z in the future. Until then, if we get additions, we are taking them through this process in order to get the side yard alignment incorrect. So this was platted in 1980 and annexed in 1991. And the proposal is a room and patio cover that would align with the zero lot line portion of the yard. Next slide, please. So a little bit of an overview is the recorded plat established a 0-foot side on the left, and as part of the zero lot layout, R1 zoning requires 5-foot side yard and 15-foot rear yard. The room addition that would align on the zero lot line side is proposed to extend to 12 feet from the rear property line rather than 15. There is also an existing 10 by 12-foot shed that is encroaching on the street side yard setback. But in order to comply with regulations, the owners have elected to remove that shed so they can move forward with the special exception. So the special exception would allow the addition to be built at the 0 setback and to 12 feet, actually to 8 feet for the rear yard as written by the utility easement on the plat. Next slide. So this is a site plan of the area. As you can see in the back, there is the 8-foot utility easement. The house is sited on the left side of the lot, and this is a street side corner. So you can see the street side on the right side. There's a dashed square kind of midway up. That is the existing shed that is proposed to be removed. And that will actually be one of the conditions. So there's an additional condition on this site to remove that shed. So this is the plot plan. And next slide. Here you can see a couple of elevations. They have proposed to match the siding to what is already in existence. There will be a room addition on the back side, as well as an additional patio cover, all to match what is already there. Next slide. Side photographs. This is a view of the home at the 0 lot line side. And then you can see we have a Google excerpt that shows the rear yard of the existing home. So you can see the little shed up on bricks, and then the chimney at the back that will be removed in order to make room for the room addition there at the rear of the house. Next slide. An aerial analysis of the neighborhood. This does appear to be architecturally compatible with the neighborhood. There are 4 nearby homes that do not appear to meet the 15-foot setback. And as mentioned earlier, every home in the nearby area does not meet that 0 lot line. They're the 5-foot side setback because it was incorrectly zoned at the current time. So there are 7 approved similar special exceptions. You saw one at the last meeting as well as maybe the meeting before that. They're not pictured here in this map because it is part of the larger area, but you have approved 7 similar exceptions. Next slide. This does meet the first 3 standard criteria. It was platted before it was annexed, and the recorded restrictions are less restrictive than the zoning restrictions. And the special exception would not be less restrictive than what was recorded. As far as public welfare, there do not appear to be any issues with detriment or compatibility. Next slide. The public hearing requirements were all met. Mailers were sent out to property owners. The HOA was notified. There was an online form available, as well as some of the special circumstances with COVID. We did allow emailed in forms as well as some extra phone calls. However, we only received 1 general inquiry by phone, and staff is not aware of any opposition. Next slide. Therefore, staff is recommending that the addition be approved as long as it is constructed in accordance with the attached site plan and elevations, and also the condition that the existing shed will be removed during construction. You will now have the public hearing and staff, and there is an applicant representative available to answer any questions from the board after the public comment closes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Laura.
Mhm.
I will open the public hearing. You said the applicant was here?
Yes, we do have the a representative from the.
Representative. Does he or she desire to speak?
She does. She's only here to answer questions if you have any.
Okay. Is there anyone else here attending via phone that would like to speak at this public hearing?
We have no one registered via phone, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Thomas. I will, if no others, I will close the public hearing and we'll move forward to consideration of an action on a proposed special exception to the side and rear yard setback for 2403 Lively Lane, Lot 14, Block 3, Chimney Stone, Section 1 in the standard single-family residential R1 district. At this time, board, we will go through the 4 criteria. Number 1, first criteria, the latest recorded plat of the property was approved prior to being annexed into the city. The plat was recorded in 1980. The property was annexed in 1991. All in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Second criteria, the latest recorded plat or other recorded restriction for the property establishes a setback or other regulation that results in a setback that is less restrictive than the setback required by the City of Sugar Land Development Code. We all in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Third criteria, granting the special exception will not establish a setback that is less restrictive than the setback established by the latest approved plat or other recorded restriction. The recorded plat for 2402 Lively Lane established an 8-foot rear yard setback utility easement adjacent to the rear property line and an interior side yard setback of 0 feet. The applicant is not proposing to encroach on the 8-foot yard, is not proposing to encroach on the 8-foot rear yard setback utility easement and is proposing to match the 0-foot setback per plat. We in agreement with that?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you, everyone. And the fourth criteria, granting the special exception will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements in the district or neighborhood in which the property is located. We in agreement with that? Any concerns on that topic?
No.
Okay. Since we've gone through the 4 criteria, are there any questions that any of the board members have for Laura or for the applicant?
No.
Okay. Not seeing any other any questions or comments. We'll move forward. We've reviewed the criteria. We'll move forward and review the key aspects that staff has examined. Number 1, public safety review. There does not appear to be any public safety issues or concerns associated with this request. Number 2, proposal and the neighborhood rear yard setback comparison. The proposed addition appears to be compatible with the neighborhood based on an analysis of the surrounding area. None of the homes within the immediate area meet the side yard setback of 5 feet, and at least 4 do not appear to meet the rear yard setback requirement of 15 feet. There are 5 approved similar special exceptions in the Chimney Stone area. The proposed addition is in compliance with the recorded plat and restrictions. And number 3, the proposal and the neighborhood general architectural. The proposed addition appears to be architecturally compatible with the existing single-family residence and elevations can be included for certainty. Any comments to these three items or the criteria that we reviewed?
No.
Okay, not seeing or hearing any questions or comments. We will move forward, and I will ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Mr. Schwab.
I move that the special exception to the rear and interior side yard setback requirements for the standard single-family residential R1 district for the property located at 2401 Lively Lane, Lot 14, Block 3, Chimney Stone, Section 1, be granted with the conditions that the addition to the residence be constructed in accordance with the site plan and elevations attached to the request for the special exception, and the existing accessory building, the shed, along the street side setback at Kitchen Hill Lane be removed from the property.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schwab. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
I have a second from Ms. Lindsay. We will vote, and we'll vote roll call again. So I will go through each.
Sorry, Josh, just a quick follow-up. He said 2401. Is it 2402 or 2401?
It's 2402.
Okay. So I'm assuming the motion is for 2402.
2402. Yeah, if I said that correctly, my apologies. Did the motion? I guess is the motion written that way? Did we say 2402, Mr. Schwab?
I hope I did.
Okay.
I meant to anyway.
I'm gonna trust that you did. Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? I think we have the second from Ms. Lindsay. So let's vote. I will roll call. Mr. Schwab,
Aye, yes.
Mr. Puveda,
Aye.
Ms. Lindsay,
Aye.
Mr. Brown. I think I got you on mute, Mr. Brown.
Yes. Aye.
Okay, perfect. And Mr. LaRocca votes in favor. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll continue moving forward to the next item. Public hearing, receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed special exception to the rear yard setback for 8702 Shipping Rock Drive, Lot 1, Block 1, the Enclave at Greatwood in the standard single-family residential interim R1I district. Ms. Waller.
Just a point of clarification, this is going to be a special exception for the side yard setback, not the rear yard.
Okay.
Just to make sure that we're all clear. So this is in Greatwood, the Enclave Greatwood specifically. You can see here on the map in black, that is the lot in question. It currently has R1I interim standard zoning, which would require a 5-foot side yard setback. It was platted in 1998 and annexed in 2017, and the proposal is a shed in the side yard. Next slide. A little overview of the case. This is a little bit different than what we normally see. This applicant actually had to get a special HOA approval in order to be able to put the shed in their side yard. It has since been recorded at Fort Bend in the county clerk, making it the most recent recorded restrictions. So this specific shed and only this shed is going to be allowed to be built across that 5-foot line according to the city. So the shed is proposed to be placed at the side of the house, and it would be 1 foot from the property line and 1 foot from the house, so in between. In order to meet those 1 foot requirements, building safety does require that the shed be firewalled on both of the long sides. So both of the sides that will be only 1 foot from the house. So the special exception would allow this addition, this shed addition, only 1 foot from the house, 1 foot from the property line, as allowed by the newly recorded restrictions from the HOA. Next slide. So a site plan showing approximately where the shed will be. There is an existing concrete pad on which the shed will be placed. So the house is approximately 10 feet from the side property line, and the shed is 8 feet by 16. So it would sit centered about 1 foot from the house and 1 foot from the property line. Next slide. Here are the elevations and specifics on what exactly the shed will look like. This is what it was the allowed obstruction, and it is recorded with the county clerk's office. So this specific shed and only this shed would be allowed. And it does specifically mention that the side B and D, or the long sides, would have to be firewalls. Next slide. A Google excerpt of the house. You can see the house itself, as well as there's a little arrow on the right side. You can see kind of a lighter rectangle, and that is where a dog run used to be. So the dog run was removed, and there's still the existing concrete foundation on which they would like to place the shed. Next slide. Aerial neighborhood analysis. Again, this was taken from Google Images, but you can get a larger picture of the area. We do have nearby homes that meet the 5-foot side yard requirement. None of them appear to be over that 5-foot side yard. There are 3 approved special exceptions nearby, but again, those are for rear yard setbacks, not side yard. The HOA did require the neighbors to give approval of the shed before the new restrictions could be recorded. So the neighbor would not have an issue with having this shed in the side yard. That was required by the HOA before this even came to the city. However, there is a question of compatibility because there are no homes nearby that have a shed in the side yard. Any existing sheds nearby are in the rear yard. So that will be up to the board to make that decision on whether it is compatible or not. Next slide. It does meet the first 3 special exception criteria. It was platted prior to annexation. The recorded restrictions are less restrictive than zoning, and the special exception would not be less restrictive than what is recorded. As far as detriment to the public welfare, that is up to the board to decide. City staff did not see any apparent issues. However, you would have to decide amongst yourselves if you think this shed is compatible with the area or not. Next slide. The public hearing requirements were all met. It was posted online in a newspaper, and mailers were sent out to property owners as well as the HOA. There was an online form available to provide comments. However, staff received no inquiries and is not aware of any opposition to the special exception. Next slide. Therefore, staff does recommend approval of the special exception with the condition that the shed is constructed in accordance with the site plan and elevations that are provided here. Staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions from the board after the public hearing closes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. At this time, I'll open the public hearing, and is the applicant present, and do they have a presentation or have anything to say?
Michael Roselle here. I am the homeowner applicant for this special exception request.
Okay. Mike, before you start, let me swear you in if you plan on speaking. If that's all right. If I can get you to raise your right hand, I guess just respond. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings under the penalty of perjury?
I do.
If you could state your name and your address for the record.
Michael John Roselle, 8702 Chipping Rock Drive, Sugar Land, Texas 77479.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I thought that was a lot of good information that I had given in my application. Whoever made that PowerPoint, that was really good. That was probably Laura. So the only thing that I would add is the HOA in my neighborhood is very, very, I don't want to use the word tough to deal with, but they were, they were a little difficult to deal with. I had to make sure that everything met their criteria, to the point where even my next door neighbor, had to give not only her approval, but if she ever moved, I had to agree that the new homeowner would be made aware that if they didn't like it, it had to be removed. And there were several other stipulations that I had to agree to, just to get their approval. It was also brought to our architectural planning committee within our HOA, and it had to meet their approval. And I don't want to, but we have made several improvements to our own personal home for the neighborhood. In fact, I think you guys even have a copy of actual handwritten or personally drafted letters that all vouch for our character, for our improvements that we made to our house. And there's actually a map showing which neighbors sent the letter in. I think I had 7 or 8 neighbors that all wrote letters on our behalf. And, I think that's one of the biggest issues that the HOA had, was making sure that A, it blended in with the neighborhood, and B, that it wasn't going to bother anybody. And I've seen zero, I haven't had anybody say, hey, I don't think that would look good in our neighborhood, or, hey, I don't think that would fit. So I feel like the most difficult process was really dealing with my HOA, and I did get their overwhelming approval for this. I would also like to note that on my street, a few houses down, is another shed. The brand is called Tough Shed. It's just a well-built shed. It's not something that I wanted to go to, buy one from off the side of the road, anything like that. So a neighbor down the street actually has the exact same shed. And ironically enough, it's I don't know if it's a corner lot. It's actually my parents' house. They had it approved from the city as well. And it's visible from the street, but being that it's a corner lot, their garage is on the side of the house. So I don't know if it's technically a side yard or a rear yard. But it is on the side of there. So I guess what I'm getting at, there's another shed exactly the same, just on the side of their garage that's visible from the street, and it looks good. So I don't know if there's anything else that any other questions that you guys have for me.
Mike, if there are, we'll follow up with you after the public hearing.
Okay.
Questions from the board.
Okay.
But thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. Anyone else here to speak at this particular public hearing?
Mr. Chair, we don't have anybody signed up.
Okay, great. Thanks, Thomas. If no others, then I will close the public hearing. And before I read the consideration, Laura, let me just make sure the initial consideration references side yard, then you reference rear yard, and then looking at the site plan, it looks like we're dealing with side yard. So
It's the side yard. Yes, originally when you were reading the slide, I think you accidentally said rear yard.
I'm gonna say the wrong word.
To make
Okay.
sure that
Okay.
we all know we're talking about the side
Alright.
yard setback.
Dyslexia kicked in, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move forward then to consideration of an action on a proposed special exception to the side yard setback for 8702 Chipping Rock Drive, Lot 1, Block 1, the Enclave at Greatwood in the standard single-family residential interim R1I district. At this time, board, we will go through the 4 criteria. Number 1 criteria, the latest recorded plat of the property was approved prior to being annexed to the city. The plat was recorded in 1998. Property was annexed in 2007. In agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Second criteria, latest recorded plat or other recorded restriction for the property establishes a setback or other regulation that results in a setback that is less restrictive than the setback required by the City of Sugar Land Development Code, Chapter 2. In agreement with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Third criteria, granting the special exception will not establish a setback that is less restrictive than the setback established by the latest approved plat or other recorded restriction. I'll mention the special exception will not grant a setback that is less restrictive than the setback established on the plat or other recorded restrictions. We in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you all. The fourth criteria, granting the special exception will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property improvements in the district or neighborhood in which the property is located. Before I ask for a yay, nay vote, I guess this is the primary component that Laura mentioned related to compatibility. So let me open it up for questions. I guess I'll ask the first one for you, Laura. At the outset of your presentation, you made, and I apologize, I should have taken a better note on it. You made a comment that something related to it already being approved or it already being filed, and this would be the only one allowed going forward?
Right. So the way that this, the recorded restrictions are for this specific location, because the HOA approved a very specific, very special shed and exception to their guidelines, this is the only shed that would be allowed to encroach on that 5-foot setback.
Okay.
So if he, I guess, wanted to paint it bright pink, he would have to go through this whole process again. If they wanted to change the size or the shed in any way, they would have to go through this entire process again. So- Specific shed is the only thing that would be allowed to encroach because of the way that it was recorded.
Specific to their property, you're saying, not specific
Yes.
to the neighborhood.
It's specific to this specific lot. This shed is the only thing allowed in this spot on this lot.
Okay, I got you.
Josh, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Following up on your question, since this latest variance that the HOA has filed for this specific shed, this specific variance,
Mhm.
if we approve this special exception, and then later on the shed, the neighbors, they change ownership, and the neighbor says, "I don't want that shed there," then he'll have to remove that according to the variance that was filed.
Correct.
How would that affect what we're asked to be approved, what we are asked to be approved tonight? Like, we'll be approving a
Right.
special exception. Will that be
So the
nullified?
Yeah, so with the city, the shed would be allowed to be built no matter what the neighbor says, but it would be in violation of the HOA restrictions. So at that point, it's the HOA's rule and their decision to decide how they want to handle that, any further action. But it would be allowed to remain no matter who the neighbor is or who the property is. This specific shed can be in this specific spot for forever, as far as the city is concerned. It's the HOA that would be in charge of enforcing the removal of the shed if the neighbor does not want it.
Okay, then if the HOA does have it removed because the neighbor objected, then they come back later, would they have to go through this process again if they wanted to put another shed there? Or
Only if it's a different shed. So if they want to put up the same exact shed in the same exact spot, they would be allowed to do that without having to get another special exception.
but any change from that would have to come
Would
back
have to run through the whole process again.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question too. I'd like to know, I heard you say that the neighbors have indicated to the HOA that they approve this. Have they given written approval to this?
So there are, I believe, 8 letters that were provided by the applicant. Because they were not official forms, I wasn't able to include them in the report, but we do have 7 written statements from nearby neighbors, the people who would be able to see it and who live on the street and would look at it each day, I guess. And they all have no issue with it.
Okay.
We also heard no opposition, so that's another key.
And it's staff's recommendation to be approved.
Yes, as far as we can see. Mhm.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Brea, do you mute?
I was going to say Herb asked the question I was going to ask, so thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, I think the main question is probably more of obviously clearly the applicant has checked all the boxes related to specific to his property. I guess in my mind, the only question would be just the future as it relates to the Pandora box effect of sheds being built at every,
Yes.
down the street at every single residence. And I know that's kind of a little far-fetched of a statement, but I guess if we're looking at this 4th criteria, that would be the only thing I would see as being potentially detrimental. But then again, each individual applicant would have to go through the same process of HOA and getting approvals from neighbors and
Correct.
everybody in site. And so if that's saying, if we're not granting, if our approval of this particular special exception doesn't necessarily open the floodgates, then I don't see it being detrimental. I guess any other comments from the board in terms of this particular criteria?
Well, I'm just curious as to why, I know it's set on the side. Is there a reason why this was not put in the back of the house versus the side where it's visible from the street? That would be my question.
I'll let Mr. Mike handle that.
The rear of the house actually has a covered patio for a
Mike,
portion of it.
Mike, let me stop you 1 second. Thomas, can you pop up the site plan again?
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll cue it back up on the PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect. And Mike, give us a second for this to pop up just so it'll be easier to visualize
Yes.
as you're talking.
That's perfect. Laura, you're muted. Oh, I didn't know if you were trying to say
Should
something.
be, slide 20, just to try and help. There you go.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. So we actually have a pool, and anywhere that you could actually put a shed, that the spot where it says lot 1, that looks like it's an open area that we could do it. However, there's a bordered in, mulched in rainbow swing set that we had for, the kids are 5 and 8, so probably had it for 6 years or so. The spot that, if you'll notice the red box where the proposed shed would go, there's a white outline there that when we got the house, there was a concrete pad that was poured already. And so we had an existing dog run for a hunting dog that we own, but that just made the most sense of where we could put it. So, and let me just also say, I don't particularly, I would have loved to have had another option besides a shed, like more garage space, but the garage space that we had, we actually encountered a bit of a flood in our master bath and ended up remodeling the entire interior. That was all permitted through the city. Just want to throw that out there. So we really lost a lot of our garage space that we had for storage and whatnot. And we have a dog run that really doesn't even get used. So the existing pad that's already encroaching on that build line just made the most sense and really that's the only place that we even had to put it.
Karen, did that answer your question?
It does. And I have one other question.
Sure,
If
go
you're
ahead.
looking at the front elevation of the home, just the front of the home,
Yes.
on that side, are there any plans to landscape in front of that area?
There are not.
Landscaping there, or any putting shrubs or anything that would make it, maybe more attractive from the street level?
Is there a fence that separates that
There
area?
is a fence. There is a fence that separates it, and I wanted to see if you guys could see this. This is actually the exact same shed that's down the street, so you can see kind of what it looks like. However, this is my parents' house. Their fence had some vine and whatnot growing all over it that they just removed, and I will say that. Man, my dad's going to be mad for me saying this. Our fence looks a lot better than that because we had it replaced several years ago. And it's nicely capped on the front. That's actually something that I proactively brought up to the HOA when we were, trying to get approval on the shed from the HOA first. And I even mentioned, hey, I'm willing to do anything that you guys need. I just need your approval. So whatever your stipulations are, I have no choice but to agree to them. And I said, if it's the aesthetics that's an issue, I'd be more than happy to put something in front of it if you want to. I really don't think it's necessary because there's only a small portion that you see from over the fence line anyway, and the colors that we got approved actually really is closely matched to the house. So
That was going to be
and also I will say there is an existing tree that has a lot of foliage. It's not an oak. It really I don't see it as an eyesore. I know that's subjective, or objective, but I don't see it. I really don't see it being an issue, but again, I'm willing to do that. So
Piggybacking off of the picture you showed, what is the differential between your height of the fence, the fence height and the shed?
I would say
Comparable to what it shows in your parents, or
very, very comparable. Yes. And if you guys want to see that again.
and is it just a solid fence that you have running, I guess, perpendicular to your house, and then it goes parallel?
Yes.
If you're looking at it from the front yard, I'm assuming basically comparable.
Yes. Very comparable.
What other questions do we have, board? So if no other questions, I guess let's go back. We do need to hit on the fourth criteria and address if we feel like the special exception is not detrimental to the public welfare interests, the property or improvements in the district or neighborhood in which the property is located. Anybody have any major objections to that statement? If there are no objections, then we'll continue to move forward, and let's review the three aspects that staff examined during their process. Number one, public safety review. There does not appear to be any public safety issues or concerns associated with this request. Note the building safety department has confirmed that the construction of the shed will be required to meet firewall code elements due to the 1 foot distance from the property lines. The second item, the proposed addition appears to be generally compatible with the existing single family residence. The area appears to have various accessory buildings such as sheds, but staff has not been able to identify sheds between the primary structure and interior side property line. The accessory buildings noted by staff appear to be at the rear of the properties rather than an interior side based on analysis of the surrounding area. There are 3 approved special exceptions in the overall Greatwood area, but are for rear yard setbacks. The proposed addition is in compliance with the recorded plat and latest recorded restrictions. The area proposed for the shed in question has an existing concrete slab in place and a prior partially enclosed structure in the past. The applicant is proposing to utilize the existing concrete slab for placement of the new shed if approved. And then the third item, the proposed addition appears to be generally architecturally compatible with the existing single family residence and type of sheds in the neighborhood, and elevations can be included for certainty. So we've gone through the 3 key aspects that staff has examined. We've talked about the 4 criteria. Any other comments or questions before we move forward?
Quick question. The neighbors are okay with this?
Laura, you muted.
Yes. Yeah. The nearby neighbor, or immediate next door neighbor, actually has to sign off on it and be okay with it. And if she at any time changes her mind, or the neighbor itself changes and they don't like it, the shed will have to be removed, as mentioned earlier, throughout that whole process. And then nearby neighbors who live across the street and in the cul-de-sac did write letters to the HOA giving their approval or no objection. So the nearby people who would be looking at it each day have no objections.
Yeah, I guess my comment would be given staff's recommendation, and then also if I think probably most of us have lived in a neighborhood with an HOA. Those are typically, Mike didn't want to say it, but they're all usually very challenging and very stringent. And so I guess given their approval, those are a couple of things to take into account. And so, any other comments, questions? If not, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Privetta.
I move that the special exception to the interior side yard setback requirement in the standard single-family residential interim R-1-I district for the property located at 8702 Chipping Rock Drive, Lot 1, Block 1, the Enclave at Greatwood, be granted with the condition that the shed structure at the residence be constructed in accordance with the site plan and elevations attached to the request for the special exception.
Mr. Puvetta has made a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Schwab has seconded. We have a motion and a second. We will vote by roll call again, and I will say your name if you can give a yay or a nay. Mr. Schwab,
Yay.
Mr. Puvetta,
Yay.
Ms. Lindsay,
Yay.
Mr. Brown,
Yay.
and Mr. LaRocca is affirmative as well. The special exception motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And we'll move forward to item 5C, public hearing, receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed variance request from the rear yard setback requirements for 163 Azalea Street, Lot 3, Block 1, Brookside Addition, Section 2 in the standard single-family residential R1 district. Before we move forward to Laura, at this time, I will be recusing myself from this particular public hearing, so I will be handing the gavel, so to speak, over to Mr. Schwab and Laura on the.
So we'll get started with the presentation. To begin with, I just wanted to go over the differences between a special exception and a variance. So special exceptions allow the property to comply with pre-annexation setbacks or recorded setbacks rather than the current zoning district setbacks that are approved by the city. Staff makes recommendations based on our research, and the criteria does involve compatibility rather than a hardship. So the difference here with the variance, variances can provide relief from bulk and other special zoning regulations. However, special circumstances such as a hardship do have to exist. Variances, staff does not make a recommendation. The board has to find that all 4 criteria are met and give findings for each of them in order to grant the variance request. Next slide. So the 4 variance criteria that you will be looking at for this site. Number 1, the variance is not contrary to public interest. Number 2, there are special circumstances or conditions of land or building. Number 3, a literal enforcement of ordinance results in an unnecessary hardship. And number 4, if granted, the spirit of the ordinance is observed and substantial justice done. Next slide. So to discuss the specifics about this exact lot, this is part of Old Sugar Land. It was part of the original city limits when it was incorporated in 1959. It was then platted later in 1965. So that makes it not eligible for a special exception. It would have to go through a variance because of the order in which it was platted. The variance is a request from section 2-72, the rear yard setback requirement of 15 feet in the standard R1 single family residential zoning. Next slide. A case overview. So as I mentioned, this is located in part of the original city limits of Sugar Land. So it does not qualify for a special exception. The recorded plat established a 10-foot rear yard setback, whereas the zoning setback is 15 feet. The house as it stands does meet both setback requirements. It's actually closer to 20 feet from the rear yard. The addition will comply with the platted restrictions of 10 feet, but it does not meet the 15-foot rear yard setback for zoning. So the current 15-foot setback requirement was put in place as early as 1982, and it does continue to be the rear yard setback in all subsequent ordinances, even as zoning has changed. It's remained 15 feet. And next slide. The proposed first floor expansion is behind the garage. It is proposed to be a sunroom and a new master suite. The existing home is about 23 feet 9 inches from the rear property, so well within that 15-foot setback. The applicant is proposing to be 10 feet 2 inches from the rear property line, which does result in 5 feet of encroachment into that required 15-foot rear yard. Next slide. So this is a survey of the existing conditions. You can see the house there. It's a fairly large lot, but it is a cul-de-sac lot, so the odd shape is a little different. It means the house had to be set back 41 feet in order to get the house to fit across there properly. But the house as it stands is 23 feet 9 inches from the rear property line. Next slide. So this is the proposed plot plan. You can see the existing house in white, and then at the bottom on the right side where there are dashes, that is the new addition where the sunroom and then master suite will be. If you look on the other side, you can see a different symbol. That is a proposed paver patio and then a pool that would be there. The next slide. These are the exterior elevations. So you can see the addition from the front just a little bit there on the far left side on the top elevation. The other elevations show that the siding is going to be proposed as is siding, hardy siding, and then brick where the windows and where you can see it from the pool, but from the street and the rear of the house, it would be siding. Next slide. So this is a zoom in of the plot plan just so you can get a better idea of exactly what they're asking. So the red box is for the addition, and that is what the variance is for. It is proposed a new master suite, so a sunroom that would then lead into the master suite off of the kitchen and behind the garage. It would be about 10 feet 2 inches or 10 feet 3 inches, depending on exactly where you measure it from the rear property line. Next slide. This is taken from some material that the applicant did provide from their architect. You can see here in yellow, that is the area that encroaches. So it's only about 116 square feet that does encroach. So it's a very small adjustment. I believe it's about 17% of the entire addition that is in the easement. So, not easement, setback. It will be up to the board to decide if they should maybe change their drawing or to allow that small encroachment. Next slide. So some specifics of the case. The addition is proposed to be 663 square feet, and about 116 of that is encroaching. The applicant does believe that special circumstances are the shape of the cul-de-sac lot and the position on that. The house is 41 feet from the front property line, and 25 is the required setback by plat. So that is 16 feet further than would be required. However, I did do some math and some research, and the average depth of the lot, if you take off that front 16 extra feet, would still meet the 110 foot minimum depth. So even if you take off that extra 16 feet that the house is set back and is maybe considered wasted space, it would still meet all of the setbacks and, with the size minimums of the lot for the R1 district. This extra front yard that is buildable area, but is also wasted because it is in the front yard rather than the rear, is about 886 square feet or 7.49% of the entire lot. So it's not a very large portion of this lot that is wasted there in front of the house. Next slide. So this is the form and the measurements that I took using the scale and some of our renderings that were given to us. This came from the survey and then using the scale from the survey. So you can see that front portion there along the curve that says 885 SF, that's square footage. So that was what I was considering the wasted space. Then I measured 25 feet from the front of the house out. So that would be the new front curves because the house does have a 25-foot build line that was platted. So I took the measurements then from either side from that 25 feet in front of the house measurement, and it does still average out to be exactly 110 square feet, 110 linear feet of depth of the lot. Next slide. There is a nearby variance case. It's similar in that they requested a 5-foot encroachment so that they could be 10 feet from the property line. However, the lot layout for this was different. The garage existed at 10 feet from the property line, and they were requesting to build a second floor above the garage and then connect that to the home so that the garage and this new portion of the house would be encroaching into that 15-foot setback, and it was denied in 1997. Next slide. So a Google excerpt here, you can see this is pointing to the lot itself there at the backyard where the the addition would have been placed. All nearby homes meet the 15-foot rear yard setback requirements. There are some sheds and garages that are closer than 15 feet to the rear property line. However, these are considered accessory structures rather than primary structure. So that does allow for them to be closer to the rear yard by our zoning and also the recorded restrictions. Because this addition is connected directly to the house and is air-conditioned livable space, it is considered part of the primary structure and would have to meet the 15-foot setback. And next slide. So the public hearing requirements were met. There was an online form available to provide comments in advance of the meeting. We did receive one of those earlier today, so that will be read during the public comment period. Aside from that, no other inquiries were received and staff is not aware of any oppositions to this variance request. Next slide. So the variance criteria. In order to grant a variance, the board will have to have a unanimous vote because there are only 4 members of you since Joshua had to recuse himself. So they will need to find that the variance is not contrary to the public interest, that there are special circumstances or conditions that apply to the land or building for which the variance is sought. Literal enforcement does result in an unnecessary hardship, and that if granted, the spirit of the ordinance is observed and substantial justice is done. Next slide. So some points for your consideration. Staff does not make a recommendation on this request. The property was platted in 1965 and incorporated into the city in 1959. So it was platted after it was already part of the city. The existing home does meet both platted and zoning setbacks. The addition would encroach 5 feet into the 15-foot zoning setback. And the board should consider that granting this variance could set a precedent for other properties in the area. Next slide. So ZBA does have several options. You can approve the variance as it was proposed. You can include any conditions you would like. You can approve it, but revise it. So maybe allowing only 3 feet instead of 5 feet, revise it in any way you want to. Or you can choose to table and place it on hold until you can get additional information. Or you can deny the variance if you feel that all 4 criteria are not met. Please note that if the variance is granted, it still does not relieve the applicant of meeting building codes and permitting. So they would still have to go through all of the normal building permit and would have to meet all of the city and state's building codes and fire codes. Next slide. So this will be presented by the applicant. I would like to introduce them, and then they will need to be sworn in before they can give their presentation in the following slides. So Mr. Biles?
Yeah, ready to sworn in.
Okay, Mr. Biles, do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the...
Mr. Schwab, if I could open the public hearing first.
Okay, okay. Okay, so now citizens who desire to address the board with regards to matters pertaining to the public hearing will be heard at this time. And I'm assuming that the applicant does want to make a presentation since he has slides ready to go. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
My wife, Marty, also needs to be sworn in as well.
Marty, is that her name?
Yes.
Okay, so both of you, I guess, then, do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings under the penalty of perjury?
Yes.
And did your wife say yes too? Okay. Now, can you give us your name and address again, once again for the record?
Yes, sir. My name is Joe Biles. We live at 163 Azalea Street in Sugar Land, Texas, 77478.
And my name is Marty Biles, and I live at 163 Azalea Street, Sugar Land, Texas, 77478.
Okay, thank you. And Laura, you had slides for them?
Yes, there are slides. They should be popping up right now.
Okay, it's all yours, Mr. Biles.
Great. So again, my name is Joe Biles. This is my wife, Marty. We have 2 children. We moved to this house in June of last year. It's a relatively small house, 2,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms. My wife is from Missouri, so she often gets family visiting and friends visiting. So it wasn't shortly after we moved that we decided to add on this proposed master suite. And as you can see here, we are again, and I'll address this a little bit later, we are asking for just a little bit of a sliver into that 15-foot setback encroachment. You can go to the next slide. So I read ahead and found out the 4 criteria to meet, and I'd like to address each one of those. The first criteria is the variance is not contrary to the public interest. We've been kind of racking our brain as to how this would be contrary to the public interest. The only thing we come up with is possibly flooding. We assured that we are going to get gutters, and we're going to direct the water down our driveway or the designated drainage area as you see in our plat map there. So you can go to the next slide. The second criteria, there are special circumstances or conditions applying to the land or the building for which the variance is sought. We believe we meet both the special conditions to the land or the lot size and special considerations to the building as well. Regarding the special conditions to the land of the lot first, you can see right there the area, 4 or 5 blocks surrounding our home. We are the only cul-de-sac in those neighborhoods represented there. And on the cul-de-sac, there are approximately 5 homes. Technically, there's 1 home that actually faces Azalea Street, so I question as to whether or not it's on the cul-de-sac. There's really 4 homes that have the odd-shaped lot that is symbolic of cul-de-sac lots. So just taking all of these homes into consideration, it's a very unique situation that we're in, being on a cul-de-sac, and taking, again, all those neighborhoods into consideration, it represents about 2% of the typical lot in those areas represented there. So you go to the next slide. So as Laura had mentioned, we do have a 25-foot setback from the street, but there's special consideration. Even in this case, the writers of the law recognize that cul-de-sacs are unique. So they granted, actually it's a 20-foot setback that the buildings need to be backed up against. My primary issue with this is that because the home wasn't able to be built further up, you can see highlighted in both of those corners the 5-foot setbacks that the current building has. It really squanches, and you'll see this in a future map, it really kind of squanches our backyard. So even though the backyard is long, it's very narrow. And that comes into play when we were drafting these designs. Anything else? Okay, next slide. When we walked around with the architect, she gave us various options as to where we could locate our bedroom. One of the options, and I'm going to talk about the other ones a little bit later, were to move the garage up, which would allow us a wider, larger bedroom within our outside of the setback area. The problem with that, as I mentioned before, is that we're constrained because of this pie-shaped cul-de-sac. We can't move the garage up because we would then be encroaching into that 5-foot setback. I had thrown out the idea of maybe angling it, but the architect said that angling it will not look good from the street, and it would be aesthetically, it wouldn't be look good, and it would also be much more expensive because of the different roof lines. It would also be, we have a side door there. You can't quite see it. It's not labeled in that picture, but it's just outside that kitchen, which is in the left-hand side of that drawing, has a window there above the kitchen sink, very common to most all kitchens. And by moving that garage up, we would then be blocking that window. So that was not an option for us. So you go to the next slide. So that was talking about the special conditions for the land or the lot. I'd like to address special conditions of the building itself. Again, talking to the architect who showed us various options, the only other two options were to build into the southwest corner of the lot. You can see it there in that excerpt where the existing pine tree would be. There are significant problems with that, actually. In order to access, if we built that room there, in order to access that room, as highlighted in that picture, we would have to actually go and tear down the existing guest bathroom. And considering that this is a small house, that's the only guest bathroom we have. So we'd have to relocate that, which would be a lot more expensive than our current plans. So it would be cost prohibitive. So next slide. The other option, building again in the southwest corner, is to access that room or the proposed master bedroom from our living room. We do have a chimney there. So she said we would need to remove the chimney, which we don't want to do. And we'd have to exit, put in a door there, and then turn that sharp 90-degree corner as highlighted. The problem with having a hallway there is we would isolate what is currently the master bedroom is labeled. There's a window. I know there looks to be a door there. That's a proposed door. Currently, there's a window there. So that we would have to block off that window. And then we would also have to block off the window that's in the master bedroom bathroom there. There's a little window. It would also be extensive reconstruction, if you will, of the current roof line. So we would have to widen that roof line, which is, again, cost prohibitive. There was also another issue that our architect brought up in that isolating this bedroom, meaning shutting off all windows in the bedroom itself and in the bathroom, would cause a fire hazard. So she suggested that we might have a problem permitting that. Permitting is one issue. Second issue is we would prefer not to have a fire hazard in what is hopefully going to be our guest bedroom in the future. So next slide. So the third criteria is, a literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. This house is in Belknap Brookside subdivision, which is a designated historic subdivision. Our house was built in 1965. We love it. It's an old historic house. We would like to maintain as much of the current floor plan as we like. So the idea is of tearing up bathrooms or blocking in bedrooms, getting rid of windows, extending the roof lines. It's not conducive to trying to maintain the current historic value of the home. So doing so, we believe, would be unnecessary hardship. Then that last bullet point, I referenced the fact that the proposed addition is $185,000. Any significant or any additions to that southwest corner of our lot that I had mentioned would be above and beyond that. So we're pricing ourselves honestly out of the addition. We're already right at our peak at 185. And I know I read the laws of the presentation. I know you don't exclusively consider budget, but then again, you also you can't ignore it either. So it is one bullet point that I want to bring out. So if building in the southwest corner there'd be additional demolition to our home, additional electrical lines would need to be run to that southwest corner. There would be a lot more framing and foundation work that would need to be done. And again, as I mentioned before, in both of those cases, going through our guest bedroom or through the guest bathroom, we would have to significantly alter the current roof line. And then again, at this point, we have already paid for our plans. Unbeknownst to us, we when we approached our architect, we gave her the our lot plat map, and she had designed our building in the southeast corner to be within the 10-foot utility easement. But we didn't realize there was a 15-foot setback until we applied for the city permit a couple of weeks ago. So starting all over, if we had to go back to the southwest corner or to the southwest corner of our lot, we'd be back to ground zero. We'd have to spend all that money again getting our blueprints drafted up. We would also have to get additional contractors out to rebid our plans. So next slide. Criteria 4 states that if granted, the spirit of the ordinance is observed and substantial justice is done. So I looked up spirit of the law in the dictionary, and it says, the aim or the purpose of a law when it was written. And we believe, you may have a different opinion, but we believe that the 15-foot setbacks, it just allows the neighbors, and I'm all for it. It allows the neighbors some isolation from each other, just so that everybody's not built right on top of each other. We appreciate that. But I do want to point out that we are only asking for a small slither of the setback. I know Laura had mentioned the area of taking the entire new addition into consideration. The area is 17% of the new addition. Out of the entire setback, we're only encroaching in that setback about 5%. So it's a really, really small, again, sliver that we're looking for. In that picture to the right, the dotted line represents an approximately area of where that setback, of that area that would be within the setback is just to the south of that dotted line. Next slide, please. Another point we'd like to make, this is a picture of the proposed area that we're planning to build. As you can see in our neighbors there in the corner, everybody has a shed right there in that corner that we're planning to build. So to me, it wouldn't be obscuring anybody's view or vision because they already have a structure there blocking their vision anyway. And that's probably why we haven't received any negative comments about our proposed plan. So to be honest with you, I don't know if this is the last slide or if there's one more, but if you want to click it. Okay, so I think that's the last slide. So unless, honey, you have anything you want to add?
I think the only thing I would like to add is, of course, we have looked at all options of this construction. And one of the main reasons, too, that we felt it was necessary to try to build behind the garage and on that portion of the yard, too, is it is close to the garage, it's close to the laundry room, it's close to the kitchen and to the living room. If we had to build on the other side of our lot, as we get older, right now we're even looking at something called age in place. These are just things that you put in place in new construction. But as we get older, it would be on the other side of our property completely. And that would be going from one end of the house to the other, just to get to the kitchen, just to get to the living room. So to me, it was nice to even have that option to think that we would be all on one side of the house for when our children are out of the house, which is not too far away. One is already out, one to go. And it would just be a nice option to be able to not have to use the side of our house that currently has our bedrooms and only bathrooms. Again, having a build on the side of the house behind the garage offers for us to have yet another bathroom for this side of the house, seeing that it is a plantation style home.
Yeah, I'd just like to add also that building in the back of our garage, that is exactly where the electrical lines come in and exactly where the gas lines come in. So we wouldn't have to repipe or rerun lines or gas lines to the completely opposite end of our house. So just from a practical standpoint, it just made more sense for us to put it behind the garage where it's currently planned. Well, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak during this open session?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair. We have one comment that was submitted online.
Okay, do we have to, do you guys read that in, or do we have to swear anybody in on that?
No, sir, we can read it into the record unless you want to swear me in that I'm reading exactly what somebody...
No, let's just read it into the record, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This was submitted online from Gary Button. Address is 167 Azalea Street, Sugar Land, Texas, 77478. Comments are homeowners should be allowed this variance request. I feel it is the homeowner's property and they should be able to build or remodel as they wish. I am in support of the homeowners at this location, and he is in support or in favor of this request. That is all, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Okay, is there anyone else that wishes to speak during this public hearing? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Before I go any further, Laura and Lisa, since we did lose Josh on this, do we bring in one of the alternates?
No.
No.
Okay, all right, just want to be sure on that. Okay, so next we'll go to the consideration of an action on a proposed variance request from the rear yard setback requirements for 163 Azalea Street, Lot 3, Block 1, Brookside Addition, Section 2, in the standard single-family residential R1 district. And at this time, the board begins discussion of the criteria. The first criteria, the variance is not contrary to the public interest. And this item does require discussion among the board. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Have the neighbors okayed this? Like, has the homeowner talked to the neighbors and got their kind of 2 cents, especially the one that's right behind them, where this is kind of building out to?
So we have not heard anything about the rear neighbor, but the comment that was sent in is from a next door neighbor that would share a side property line.
Okay. That is the neighbor that is right next door?
Yes, they would share a property line. Yes, the
Okay.
1-7 Azalea is the next door neighbor.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment about item 1, the first criteria?
No, none here.
Okay. The second criteria, there are special circumstances or conditions applying to the land or the building for which the variance is sought. Again, this item requires discussion among the board. Does anyone have questions about this one?
I would just like to comment that I think the homeowners are trying to do their best with an oddly shaped piece of property and dealing with what they have. And I think because of the way the lot is shaped and because of the setback of the property, the distance from the street it is, I think that in my mind's eye anyway, that does create a special circumstance.
You said back in the 90s there was one variance that was rejected. Do you know if that was a cul-de-sac lot or was that not a cul-de-sac?
No, it's a rectangle lot. I don't know if the presentation can toggle. It would be slide 40. But there's a very light purple rectangle there at the very bottom of the map. And it's a rectangle lot on a straight street.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Can I comment on that as well?
No.
Oh!
Sorry. Sorry.
The lot backs up to a lake.
Karen, were you trying to say something?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just to document what we are saying on the second criteria, I think Mr. Brown, you were saying that because this is a oddly shaped cul-de-sac lot, that you think that this one those are the special circumstances that apply to this land.
Yeah, I
You're saying?
I think it creates a special circumstance for the homeowner. That's my opinion.
Okay. Lisa, are you writing these down, or is our attorney on the line? Or-
Yes, I'm on the line. I'm writing these down.
Okay, thank you.
As am I.
We're getting an echo, I think, from you, Lisa. Okay, is there anything else on the second criteria that the board wishes to discuss?
I just got a question for staff. Homeowner's presentation said that like their lot, the cul-de-sac lots only represent 2% of the total lots in their neighborhood. I don't know if the board can answer or not, but is that feel that's accurate?
I will say that of the lots that they gave, that is about accurate. However, there are a lot of cul-de-sacs if you look at the entire city. So we didn't do the math for every single house in the city, but for this specific area, that is accurate in the map that they gave.
Can we get any guidance from the attorney on, like, should we be just looking at the neighborhood? Should we be considering the whole city? Like, what should we be looking at in terms of uniqueness?
So for this particular factor, it's really about, are there special circumstances applying to the land itself? So you're looking at that particular piece of property.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments on the second criteria? Because I do. I'm not sure, even though that is a cul-de-sac lot and it is not a rectangle, I'm not sure if that's anything special. I understand, that the position of the house on that lot is maybe back further than it should be than they would like. But I think that there still should be some alternatives in where to place that addition where it doesn't encroach into the 15-foot setback. The staff, is that kind of a fair statement that could be an addition?
Both you and Mr. Brown have valid points. The farther, you can, this does apply to the building and the property. So the building being set further back could be the special condition rather than the shape of the lot, but that's up for you guys to decide.
So, if we say the special condition is because it's a cul-de-sac, then essentially are we setting a precedent that anytime you have a cul-de-sac?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be the precedent.
And there's lots of cul-de-sacs all over the city.
Yeah, you're right. That one worries me, that if this would apply to all the cul-de-sac lots in the city, and if a house is put a little bit further back from the street than the original house, then we're setting a pretty huge precedent that would.
Let me ask this, if you don't mind. If you look at that one slide we saw where the front corners of the house were touching the setback lines from the side properties, that was 5 feet, was that not?
Yes.
Okay. So I look at the special exception as it being more to do with the placement of that particular structure on that particular piece of land, not necessarily because it's a cul-de-sac, but because of where that building got placed, it has created the special exception for that setback in the back. Again, that's
Slide 50 should have the measurement that you're looking for. Or 51, sorry. It could be the building itself, yes.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it from my standpoint of not necessarily because it's a cul-de-sac, but because of where that building, there it is, where that building is positioned, it's creating, in my mind, a special circumstance for where that, for that setback issue.
It is noted at 41 feet 2 inches from the front property line.
But the lot itself doesn't have anything special to it. Just because the building is put, I mean, our main concern is the lot,
The
unique.
lot or the building. For criteria number 2, it could be the lot or the building.
It could be either, correct?
Okay, all right. But again, if we do say that that lot is, well, the lot or the building, or does it have to be both the lot and the building?
It's or, either one. And if I'm incorrect, Anjali, please correct me, but I believe it's or.
Yeah, you're correct. It's or. It's either the lot, the land, or the building.
So if somebody somewhere else in the city had a cul-de-sac lot that had a non-rectangular shape like this, and they originally built their house very close to the back, the rear yard setback, then that would, fall under the same situation that we're talking about here now. And we would say they could even build back further. I'm worried about a precedence here.
They could use it as the argument, yes.
And what worries me about that precedence is that if we do this, then we're basically avoiding. We're going around the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're going around the zoning process. We're going around the public hearings for zoning, and we're rewriting that ordinance.
Well, it would be just for this lot or each lot that you would have to approve each one individually.
But once we've approved it, then that precedent is set.
Well, is it set, or is it just, can someone just bring that up in discussion? And in other words, because we approve this 4 foot or 3 feet encroachment, it doesn't necessarily open it up across, make it a new rule, does it?
I think it does.
And
Angela?
no, you're correct, Mr. Brown. It's you can look at it, and you still have to make the determination as these cases come before you. But that homeowner could bring it up before you and say, well, you granted it here, and so it would be another thing they could use in support of their case.
Okay.
So it doesn't automatically mean you have to approve something in the future. They would still have to meet all 4 criteria for each case. They can just use it as part of their argument for their case.
Do we have the information about the one that was denied in the 90s? Do we know?
All the information is the stuff that was in the slide. We have it's very limited because it was 23 years ago. But we know that it was a living space above the garage that would connect to the house, and that the existing garage encroached 5 feet. And so they were requesting to include that addition above the garage in that 5 feet.
Okay, does anybody else have any discussion on the second criteria? Okay, the third criteria, a literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Again, this requires discussion on the board. Any discussion?
I think we've discussed. I've said what I felt, what my opinion was on this. So, fellow board members.
I mean, if I'm honest, I don't see the hardship. I understand that if they don't do it this way and they want to do it another way, it'll cost them more money, but they don't have to do the addition. I didn't hear anything that says the addition is absolutely required or the space becomes unlivable.
I agree with you, Mr. Pravada. I think that there are other options. They may not be what is the most desirable by the homeowner, but we're not depriving them of the use of the rest of the house or the property. I don't see the hardship either.
I agree.
Okay, and you've got that down, Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Let's go on to the fourth criteria. And if we did grant this, that the spirit of the ordinance is observed and substantial justice is done, I think that, again, this one does require discussion on the board. I think we've kind of hit on this several times during the first three criteria. I don't think that we're seeing the hardship. I don't think that we're seeing that a lot is, there is some discussion, some, conflicts of what we think is special circumstances or not. But what do you guys say about the fourth criteria?
Well,
Mr. Brown?
Go ahead. Someone, Karen?
yeah, they've gone over several options with us, and they each have their pros and cons. Based on the way that their preference is presented to us, I don't have a problem approving it. I think that it would still be in the spirit of the ordinance. I do think that they've done due diligence there and have tried to come up with an option that would in the best way possible still conform to the spirit of the law. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lindsay. Others, Mr. Brown, Mr. Pravada.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Pravada. Please go.
I mean, to me, the whole point of the zoning ordinances is just to make sure that you're not going too far close to your neighbor's property. That's why I wanted to know if the rear neighbor, the one it's really going towards, is kind of okay with it. Because, if you buy a house, there's zoning, you have an expectation that your neighbors are going to comply with that zoning. So
We haven't heard any opposition or comment from that neighbor.
Okay.
And again, my commentary, much like Karen's is I look at this from a substantial justice point of view, and I understand the concern with setting a precedent. I think at the spirit of the deal, when you're talking about a sliver of property, and again, when you come to item number 4 here, is substantial justice served? In my opinion, it is. It meets the need of the homeowner that's got a significant capital expenditure in place. The variance would be minimal, and hence that's what the term and that's what this process for variance is all about, is to try to get a variance. If we have to look at these things from time to time and take our sunglasses off, because if we're not, why even have the variance process?
I mean, could we narrow the scope of how we grant it? Can we say, like, it has to be a cul-de-sac, it has to be set back this far from where it could have been set back, and the percentage over into the encroachment is a certain percentage? Can we do it that way? So we're really kind of narrowing it down.
I believe so. Is that
Precedent?
Yeah, that's my main concern. Yeah.
So that like the house would have to be over halfway of the lot back or something. You want to ask, set a certain minimum that because it is blank feet back from the setback, we would allow it.
Right, like just narrow the scope of the variance and why we're granting it. I mean, my gut feeling is it's not that much of an encroachment, but at the same time, I don't want people in the future saying, well, we're a cul-de-sac too, and so why can't we do it? So a lot of factors that make me want to say yes. The least is that it's a cul-de-sac. The main things are that the house is way farther back than it needs to be, and then they're not going that far over. I mean, if we can build that into the granting of the variance, so in the future, if there's someone who says almost exactly the same circumstances, I don't think people would have a problem. But if there's someone who's, not as difficult a circumstance, then we can, or any future board can say, hey, no, not this time.
Okay. Let me, I think we've discussed, well, let me go back to what we had for the third criteria though. That I think that we're going to stumble on this one, that we don't think that it's a hardship. Is that correct? That's an unnecessary hardship, because I think there are alternatives. Is that correct from the board members?
Well, I guess my question would be is how do you define hardship? And if the hardship is it's another $60,000 to them, or it would result in the living space not being set up for them for their later years in life, that may be a hardship to them, and it may not be a hardship to you. A literal enforcement would, again, if you're looking at it, a literal enforcement, in my opinion, would cause them to have to kind of reset from ground zero. And in my opinion, there is a hardship here.
But a literal hardship does not include any economical or financial considerations. Is that right, Ms. Thomas?
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. Courts have addressed this specific factor, and they've found in various cases that a financial hardship does not constitute an unnecessary hardship sufficient to support a variance request. Also, a property owner's personal plans and desires relative to his or her property, that's not sufficient to show unnecessary hardship. Really, the test is, will the enforcement of the zoning ordinance destroy any reasonable use of the property?
Okay, thank you. That's the words I wanted to hear. And it does not, in my mind, it does not prevent the homeowner from getting reasonable use of this land.
The one factor that was mentioned was that with the way that the master bedroom is situated today, if they have to reconfigure that and not go with the add-on, then they run the potential of having a room that is not up to safety standards because it doesn't have an exit. It's not a good viable exit. It's all closed in. It could potentially be a fire hazard. I think that's what I heard.
I can speak to that. I did communicate with our building plans examiner, Robert Schulte, and he did confirm with me that not having a window in those rooms would not hold up a permit. So that's not a standard that our city would recognize.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. Any other discussion?
So we've defined here that we can't find a hardship. Is that what we're saying?
That's what I'm hearing.
Ms. Thomas, can I hear that definition one more time? You have your mute on.
Your mute is on, Ms. Thomas.
There you go. So the test is, will enforcement of the zoning ordinance destroy any reasonable use of the property?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And what does everyone think on that? If we just discuss that third criteria.
Maybe I don't see how it would. It's pretty high standard.
I think so. I guess unless somebody has any further discussion, is there a motion?
Well, we have the opportunity to table this, right? Would we have the opportunity for the homeowners to go back and re-meet with their architects and see if there is another option for them Or at this time, would we just, based on the fact we can't identify a hardship, do we just deny this request and then they go back to their architect and start over again? What's the best course of action?
I'm going to defer to Laura, I think, on this one, but I think that if we deny it, then they could go back to their architect and come up with another plan that would not require a variance.
Correct. So they can still, they could alter their documents in any way, but they would have to meet the 15-foot setback if you deny it. If you table it, you would have to have a request for more information, but I don't know of any information that would illuminate hardship for this property.
Gotcha.
To figure out what you would want to hear to try and find a hardship.
Okay, thank you. So back to, do we have a motion?
Give me a second. I don't have the paperwork to read the motion. Does anyone else have it?
Yeah, I gonna do it.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Yeah.
I move that the variance to the rear yard setback requirement in the standard single-family residential R-1 district, the property located at 163 Azalea Street, Block 3, Block 1, Brookside Addition, be denied.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Second.
Okay, at this time, I guess we vote either with a yay or a nay. Mr. Babada?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes, I'm sorry, what?
just to clarify the motion on the floor, the motion is to vote to deny the variance, correct?
Correct. So a yes vote will deny the variance, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, is the first vote recorded correctly?
My vote is to deny. So yeah, you did.
To not, yeah. So, okay, that's right. Okay, so we're voting to an affirmative vote denies the request.
That's correct. That's correct.
You just need.
Okay, Ms. Lindsay,
Yay.
Mr. Brown.
Yay.
And I vote yay also. So it's unanimous to deny the request. Do I have that written correctly? Do I have it stated correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at this time, just back to some of the process here. We need to sign these findings of facts, I guess, and you'll send those out to us later?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So is there any, other than signing that later, I guess we just need to adjourn the meeting.
Yes,
Yes,
so
sir.
I believe it goes back over to Joshua.
Yes, and he's back.
I'm back
Thanks,
here.
Josh. You're back. Thank you.
I appreciate you doing the heavy lifting.
That was, yes, it's all yours.
With no further ado, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move we adjourn.
There's a motion. Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. We'll just do a verbal vote on this one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Awesome. At this time, the April 15th, 2020 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time. Stay safe.